The first time Caleb Hart saw his wife in 9 years, she stepped off a dusty stagecoach in front of the entire town of Haven Creek and said 5 words that stopped his heart. "I'm your wife, Caleb." He'd spent nearly a decade burying that drunken mistake, that half-remembered ceremony in a Kansas saloon before the war, sleeping under open sky, drifting from ranch to ranch, never staying long enough for anyone to ask his full name. But Mara Quinn had crossed 1,000 miles with a marriage certificate and a matching gold band, and she wasn't asking for his love. She was demanding an answer he'd never had the courage to give. If you want to see how far a man will run from the truth, and what it takes to finally make him stand still, stay with us until the very end. And please drop a comment telling us what city you're watching from so we can see how far this story travels. The Wind River Range cut the Wyoming sky like broken teeth, jagged and indifferent. Caleb Hart stood at the edge of Haven Creek with his hat pulled low, watching dust devils spiral through the settlement's half-collapsed main street. The storm had come through 3 days prior, one of those high plains monsters that turned noon into twilight and ripped canvas roofs clean off their frames. It left behind splintered lumber, overturned wagons, and a peculiar silence that felt heavier than wind. He'd planned to ride through. He always planned to ride through. But something about the way the old preacher had looked at him, tired, desperate, pleading without words, had made Caleb swing down from his horse and ask where they needed hands. Now he was waist-deep in somebody else's disaster, hauling timbers and resetting fence posts, working until his shoulders burned and his mind went blessedly quiet. That was the trick, really. Stay tired enough, and the ghosts couldn't catch up. "You got a name, son?" The blacksmith, a barrel-chested man named Garrett, handed him a canteen. Sweat plastered Caleb's shirt to his back despite the autumn chill. "Caleb." "Last name?" Caleb drank long and slow, buying time. "Hart." Garrett waited, like maybe there'd be more. There wouldn't be. Caleb handed back the canteen and turned to hoist another beam, the motion automatic practiced. He'd rebuilt 6 towns and 6 territories, always the same. Show up after the disaster, work hard, take the pay, leave before anyone got curious. "You fought," Garrett said. It wasn't a question. Something in the way Caleb moved, too careful on his left side, favoring ribs that never quite healed right, gave it away. Everyone fought. Not everyone came back. Caleb drove a nail with 3 precise strikes, then another. The rhythm was soothing, mindless. "No, sir, they didn't." Garrett studied him a moment longer, then seemed to decide that silence was answer enough. He clapped Caleb on the shoulder and moved on to the next crew. Caleb exhaled slowly, grateful. Most men his age had war stories they wore like medals. Caleb had learned to let his stay buried. By midday, the sun was a white fist overhead, and the main street looked almost like a street again. The general store's sign hung crooked but attached. The saloon's porch no longer tilted at a dangerous angle. The church, or what passed for one, just a timber frame building with a wooden cross, had its roof patched enough to keep out the next rain. Caleb was replacing a shattered window frame when he heard the stagecoach. The sound came first as a low rumble, then the crack of a whip and the driver's shout. Horses pounded into view, pulling the coach in a cloud of pale dust. It was early, wasn't supposed to arrive until Thursday, and this was only Tuesday. But storms had a way of scrambling schedules. People drifted into the street. Haven Creek was small enough that a stagecoach arrival was still an event. Garrett set down his hammer. The preacher's wife smoothed her apron. Even the children stopped their games to watch. The coach lurched to a halt outside the half-rebuilt hotel. The driver, a grizzled man named Sonny, climbed down with a grunt and opened the door. Caleb kept working. Strangers arriving meant questions, curiosity, conversation, all the things he'd spent years avoiding. He focused on the window frame, measuring the jiaodu twice, reaching for his saw. "Lord have mercy," someone whispered. The tone made Caleb look up. A woman stood in the street. She was thin in a way that spoke of long hunger, not natural build. Her dress was dark green, travel-stained and dusty, the hem torn in 2 places. She carried a single carpet bag, worn at the corners, held together with what looked like twine. Her hair, dark brown, almost black, was pulled back in a braid that had come half undone during the journey. She couldn't have been more than 30, but her face carried the kind of exhaustion that aged a person from the inside out. She looked around the street slowly, methodically, like she was searching for something specific. Then her eyes found Caleb. Everything stopped. Caleb felt the world tilt sideways. He knew that face. Not well, not the way a man should know something important, but enough. Enough that his hands went cold and the saw slipped from his grip, clattering against the porch boards. The woman took 3 steps forward. Her boots, scuffed, practical, raised small clouds with each footfall. The crowd parted without meaning to, instinct making space for whatever was about to happen. She stopped 10 feet away. "Caleb Hart," she said. Her voice was steady, but it carried. Across the street, across the years, across every mile she must have traveled to get here. Caleb's throat closed. He couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't do anything but stand there like a man facing a firing squad. "I'm your wife," she said. The street went silent. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Mara, because now he remembered, the name surfacing like something dredged from deep water, reached into her bag and pulled out a folded paper. She held it up, and even from this distance, Caleb could see the official seal, the careful script. "Mara Quinn," she continued, and there was something brutal in the way she said it, like she was driving nails into a coffin. "Married to Caleb James Hart on April 17th, 1856, in Abilene, Kansas. Witnessed by Thomas Farrow and Elizabeth Chen. Signed by Justice of the Peace William Arnett." She lowered the paper. Then she did something that made Caleb's stomach drop. She held up her left hand. On her 4th finger sat a thin gold band, scratched, dented, but unmistakable. Caleb's own hand moved without permission to his chest, to the pocket over his heart, where he'd carried a matching ring for 9 years, wrapped in oilcloth, never thrown away, never explained. 9 years, Mara said quietly. "I've looked for you for 9 years." Garrett was staring. The preacher's wife had both hands over her mouth. A young boy, maybe 7 or 8, tugged his mother's skirt and asked in a loud whisper, "What's a wife?" Caleb felt his boots start moving, backward. One step, then another. "Caleb," Mara's voice cracked, just slightly, but he was already turning, already walking away, past the curious faces and the half-finished repairs, toward the livery where his horse waited. His heart slammed against his ribs. His breathing came too fast, shallow, like he'd been gut-punched. He heard her call his name again, sharper this time, but he didn't stop. By the time he reached the livery, his hands were shaking. He fumbled with the saddle, dropped the cinch twice, finally got it secured through sheer force of will. The horse, a steady roan gelding he'd bought in Colorado, sensed his panic and danced sideways. "Easy," Caleb muttered. "Easy." He swung up and urged the horse forward, out the back of the livery, away from the street, away from the questions and the stares and the woman with his ring on her finger. He rode hard. The land opened up around him, rolling grassland that stretched toward the mountains, dotted with sage and juniper. The sun was starting its descent, turning the sky the color of a fresh bruise. Caleb pushed the gelding faster, leaning low over its neck, as if speed alone could outdistance the past. He didn't know where he was going. Didn't matter. Just away. The memory came anyway, surfacing in fragments. Kansas. A saloon that smelled like whiskey and sawdust. He'd been 22, fresh off a cattle drive, pockets full of pay, and nothing resembling sense. There'd been a girl, a woman, dark-haired and laughing, and she'd seemed like the only solid thing in a spinning room. Someone had suggested marriage as a joke. Or maybe it hadn't been a joke. Caleb couldn't remember. The details were hazy, waterlogged with drink. He remembered a justice of the peace who looked annoyed to be woken at midnight. He remembered signing something, his handwriting barely legible. He remembered a ring, 2 rings, cheap gold that came from God knew where. And he remembered waking up the next morning in a boarding house room, alone, with a headache like a railroad spike and the creeping certainty that he'd made a terrible mistake. He'd left Abilene that afternoon, signed up for the army a week later. Figured the war would either kill him or give him a fresh start. It had done neither. By the time the gelding started to flag, the sky was full dark. Stars spread overhead in their cold thousands. Caleb finally slowed, then stopped, letting the horse blow and stamp. He sat there in the saddle, breathing hard, shame crawling through his gut, like something poisonous. 9 years. She'd looked for him for 9 years. He pulled the oilcloth from his pocket with numb fingers, unwrapped it carefully. The ring sat in his palm, dull gold catching starlight. He'd told himself 100 times to throw it away, to bury it, to sell it. But he never had. Some part of him, coward that he was, had always known this moment might come. Dawn found him still sitting on a flat rock 3 miles outside Haven Creek, the horse grazing nearby. The eastern sky bled pink and gold. Caleb's eyes burned from lack of sleep, his body stiff from the cold. He should keep riding. That was the smart play. Put distance between himself and Haven Creek, between himself and Mara Quinn, Mara Hart, God help him, and whatever she'd come here to demand. But even as he thought it, he knew he wouldn't, because for 9 years he'd been running, and all it had earned him was exhaustion. He rode back slowly. Haven Creek looked different in morning light, smaller, more fragile. Smoke rose from a few chimneys. A dog barked somewhere. Caleb guided the gelding toward the livery, dismounted, saw to the tack with mechanical precision. When he finally stepped back into the street, he half expected her to be gone. A fever dream. A whiskey hallucination. But she was there. She sat on a bench outside the general store, her carpetbag at her feet, her hands folded in her lap. She looked like she'd been sitting there all night. When she saw him, she didn't stand, didn't move, just watched him approach with eyes that were too tired for anger. Caleb stopped a few feet away. His tongue felt thick. "You should have stayed in Kansas." "I didn't come all this way to hear that." "What did you come for?" Mara stood slowly, brushing dust from her skirt. "I came for an answer." "To what?" "To whether you're a coward or just a liar." The words landed like a slap. Caleb flinched. I don't remember much. That night. I was drunk. We were both... I wasn't drunk," Mara said quietly. The street was starting to wake up. Garrett emerged from the blacksmith shop. The preacher's wife peered through her curtains. Caleb felt their eyes like brands. "Look," he said, lowering his voice. "There's a room at the boarding house. I'll pay for it. You can rest, clean up, and then... Then what? You'll disappear again?" "I'll figure something out." Mara laughed, but there was no humor in it. 9 years I've been figuring something out. I'm done figuring, Caleb." He didn't know what to say to that. The silence stretched, unbearable. Finally, Mara picked up her bag. "Is there a boarding house or not?" "Yeah, just..." He gestured vaguely toward the end of the street. "I'll find it." She walked past him, close enough that he caught the scent of road dust and something faintly floral, probably soap from weeks ago. He almost reached for her arm, almost said something, but the words died in his throat. He watched her go, his fists clenched at his sides. Garrett approached, wiping his hands on a rag. "That true? She your wife?" Caleb couldn't look at him. "It's complicated." "Don't look complicated. Looks like you got married and ran off." "It wasn't like that." "Then what was it like?" Caleb had no answer. He turned and walked toward the saloon, ignoring the stares, the whispers that followed him like flies. The saloon was empty except for the barkeep, a man named Dutch who'd seen enough trouble not to ask about it. Caleb ordered whiskey, drank it standing, ordered another. "Rough morning?" Dutch asked. "You could say that." "Woman out there says she's your wife." "Word travels fast." "It's a small town." Dutch refilled his glass without being asked. "She staying?" "Don't know." "You gonna talk to her?" Caleb downed the whiskey in one swallow. It burned, but not enough. "Don't know that either." Dutch shrugged. "Seems like the kind of thing a man ought to know." Caleb set the glass down harder than he meant to. "You got opinions on my life now?" "Nope. Just saying running once is a mistake. Running twice is a choice." Caleb left money on the bar and walked out. The next 2 days passed in a kind of fog. Caleb worked on the rebuilding crews, avoiding conversation, avoiding eye contact. Mara stayed in the boarding house, or so he assumed. He didn't check, didn't ask. But Haven Creek was small, and news moved through it like water through a sieve. She'd gone to the general store for supplies. She'd washed her dress and hung it to dry behind the boarding house. She'd asked the preacher's wife about work, sewing, cooking, anything. And people talked. They talked about the quiet woman who'd arrived with a marriage certificate and a sad story. They talked about Caleb Hart, The drifter who never stayed, who apparently had a wife he'd forgotten about. Opinions divided. Some felt sorry for Mara. Others thought she was a fool for tracking down a man who clearly didn't want to be found. Caleb heard it all, in fragments, in whispers that cut off when he entered a room. On the third day, he found her. She was sitting on the steps of the church, mending a tear in her sleeve with careful, precise stitches. The afternoon sun caught in her hair, turning it bronze at the edges. Caleb approached slowly, like she might bolt. "You eat today?" Mara didn't look up from her sewing. "Why do you care?" "I don't—" He stopped, tried again. "I just wondered." "I ate." "Good." She tied off the thread, bit it clean, then finally looked at him. "Is this the part where you offer me money to leave?" "No." "Then what do you want?" What did he want? To explain? To apologize? To turn back time and make different choices? He settled for the only truth he could manage. "I don't know." Mara studied him for a long moment. "You know what I thought when I finally found you? I thought he'll be different. 9 years is a long time. Maybe he grew up. Maybe he became the kind of man who could face what he did." She folded the mended sleeve carefully. "But you're exactly the same, still running, still hiding." "I'm not hiding." "Then what do you call this?" She gestured at the street, the town, the mountains beyond. "You drift from place to place, never using your full name, never staying long enough for anyone to ask questions. That's not living, Caleb. That's haunting." The word hit him like a fist. Haunting. Yeah, that was about right. "I can't give you what you want," he said quietly. "You don't even know what I want." "Don't I?" He gestured at her ring. "You want a husband, a home, some kind of life." "I want," Mara said slowly, standing up, "for you to stop assuming you know me based on one drunken night a decade ago." She stepped closer, and he could see the fine lines at the corners of her eyes, the faint scar on her chin. "I didn't come here for love, Caleb. I came here because I'm tired of living in limbo. I can't marry anyone else. I can't move on. Not while this—" She held up the marriage certificate. "Says I'm bound to a ghost." Understanding settled over him like cold water. "You want a divorce. I want an ending, one way or another." It should have been a relief. Instead, it felt like something breaking. "Okay," Caleb heard himself say. "Okay, I'll find out how. What we need to do." Mara nodded once, brisk, businesslike. "Thank you." She walked past him, back toward the boarding house. Caleb stood there on the church steps, feeling emptied out. A divorce. Of course. That made sense. That was the clean solution, the logical answer to an illogical problem. So why did it feel like he'd just agreed to cut off his own arm? That night, Caleb couldn't sleep. He lay on a bedroll in the livery loft, staring at the ceiling beams, his mind churning. He kept seeing Mara's face, not as it was now, worn and tired, but as it had been that night in Kansas, laughing, bright, looking at him like he was someone worth knowing. He'd been so young, so stupid. The memories sharpened, details surfacing. They'd talked for hours before the wedding, or what passed for talking when you were half drunk and 22. She'd told him about her family, a father who drank, a mother who died when Mara was 12. She'd been working in a dress shop, saving money, planning to head west and start fresh. "I want to see mountains," she'd said, and her eyes had been bright with it, that particular kind of hope that comes before life teaches you better. "I'll take you to the mountains," Caleb had promised, reckless and sincere in the way only drunk young men can be. And then he'd left her behind. He rolled over, pressing his face into the rough wool blanket. Shame was a familiar companion by now, but it still had teeth. The next morning brought rain, a cold, steady drizzle that turned the street to mud. Caleb helped reinforce the church roof against the leak, then went to find the preacher. Reverend Matthews was a lean man in his 60s, with white hair and kind eyes that had seen too much suffering to be surprised by much. He listened to Caleb's halting explanation without interruption. "A divorce," he said finally. "Yes, sir." "You understand what you're asking for? In the eyes of God." "I understand," Caleb cut in, "but I also understand I made a promise I can't keep. Seems to me the right thing is to let her go. Let her have a real life." Matthews leaned back in his chair. "And what about you? What kind of life will you have? Same as I got now, I expect. That doesn't trouble you? Caleb looked away. Rain drummed on the roof. Trouble seems to be what I'm good at, Reverend. Matthews sighed. There's a lawyer in South Pass City, about 2 days' ride. He handles these matters occasionally, though I'll warn you, it's not a quick process. Could take months, maybe longer. I'll tell her. Caleb. The Reverend's voice stopped him at the door. Running from your mistakes doesn't make them disappear. It just means you carry them alone. Caleb didn't have an answer for that. He left. He found Mara in the boarding house dining room, sewing again. This time a shirt that belonged to Garrett's son, mending a torn shoulder seam. She was making money where she could, same as him. Can we talk? Caleb asked. She set aside the shirt. Here? Outside? They walked to the edge of town where the buildings gave way to grassland. The rain had stopped, leaving everything clean and sharp-smelling. Caleb told her about the lawyer, about the time it would take, about the money it would cost. Mara listened without expression. When he finished, she said, How much money? I don't know exactly, but I'll cover it, however much it is. I can pay my own way. Mara, I've been paying my own way for 9 years, Caleb. I don't need your charity now. He bit back frustration. It's not charity, it's my responsibility. Your responsibility, she said slowly, was to not abandon me in the first place. The words hung between them, sharp and true. You're right, Caleb said quietly. You're absolutely right, and I can't fix that. But I can do this. Please, let me do this one thing. Mara wrapped her arms around herself, staring out at the mountains. I have $12 to my name. It took me 2 years to save enough for the Stagecoach fare. So yes, if you're offering to pay for the lawyer, I'll accept. Not because I want your help, but because I want this done. Okay? They stood there in the cold wind, two strangers bound by a mistake neither of them could undo. Can I ask you something? Caleb said. What? Why now? Why after all this time did you decide to find me? Mara was quiet for so long he thought she wouldn't answer. Then she turned to face him, and there was something raw in her expression, something that made his chest tighten. Because I'm 31 years old, she said, and I'm tired of waiting for my life to start. She walked back toward town, leaving Caleb standing alone in the wet grass. That night, the livery felt too cold, too empty. Caleb lay awake, listening to the horses shift in their stalls, thinking about everything Mara had said. 31. She'd been 22 when they married, the same age he'd been. She'd lost 9 years. He'd lost 9 years too, but somehow it felt different. He'd chosen this emptiness. She'd had it forced on her. The guilt was a living thing, coiled in his gut. Around midnight, he heard something. A sound that didn't belong, soft, choked, quickly muffled. He sat up, listening. There it was again, coming from outside. He climbed down from the loft, pulled on his boots, and stepped into the night. The moon was up, half full, casting silver light across the street. The sound was coming from behind the boarding house. He found her there, sitting on the back steps with her face in her hands, shoulders shaking. She was trying desperately to cry quietly, but grief had its own volume. Mara, he said softly. She jerked upright, swiping at her face. Go away. You're freezing. I'm fine. But she wasn't. Even in the moonlight, he could see she was shivering, wearing only a thin shawl over her dress. Without thinking, Caleb shrugged out of his coat and held it out. I don't want your coat. You're stubborn as hell, you know that? And you're a coward who ran away from his own wedding. The words should have stung. They did sting, but there was something almost comforting about her anger. It was honest, clean, easier to navigate than her quiet grief. Yeah, Caleb said. I am, but you're still freezing. He draped the coat over her shoulders anyway. She didn't throw it off. For a long moment, they just sat there, not speaking. Then Mara said, voice rough, I don't even know why I'm crying. This is what I wanted, an ending. Sometimes the right thing still hurts. She laughed bitterly. You don't get to say that. You don't get to be wise about this. You're right, I don't. Another silence. The night pressed around them, vast and cold. I had a baby, Mara said suddenly. The world tilted. Caleb felt his lungs seize. What? A son. Her voice was flat now, hollow. Born 8 months after you left. He lived 6 weeks. Caleb couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The words didn't make sense, couldn't be true, had to be true because why would she lie? His name was James, Mara continued. After you, James Quinn. I gave him my maiden name because I didn't know where you were, didn't know if you were alive. She pulled the coat tighter. He had your eyes, dark brown, and your chin, stubborn, even as a baby. Mara, don't. Her voice cracked. Don't you dare say you're sorry. Don't you dare. Caleb sank down onto the steps beside her, his knees giving out. A son. He'd had a son, a child who'd lived and died while he was off playing soldier, running from consequences. What? His voice came out wrecked. What happened? Fever. The midwife said it was common, that sometimes babies just don't make it. Mara stared straight ahead, dry-eyed now, gone somewhere beyond crying. I buried him in Kansas, under an oak tree. I visit him every Sunday. Every Sunday. For 9 years. Caleb felt something break open inside him. Not clean, not cathartic, just a raw tearing that left him gasping. I would have... He started, but the sentence had no ending. Would have what? Come back? Stayed? Been a father? He didn't know how to be any of those things. I know you would have, Mara said quietly. That's what makes it worse. You would have tried, and it still wouldn't have been enough. The truth of it was unbearable. They sat there as the moon traveled west, as the night deepened, as the cold settled into their bones. Eventually Mara stood, handed him back his coat. I'm going to bed. Mara. Good night, Caleb. She went inside, closing the door with a soft click that sounded like a period at the end of a sentence. Caleb stayed on the steps until dawn, turning her words over in his mind, trying to understand how a person survived losing a child, trying to imagine the baby, James, trying to picture those 6 weeks of life he'd missed entirely. By the time the sun rose, painting the sky in shades of fire, Caleb had made a decision. He couldn't give Mara those years back, couldn't bring their son back to life, couldn't undo the damage, but he could stop running. He could stand still for once, face what he'd done, and help her get free, even if it killed him. He stood, stiff and cold, and walked into Haven Creek as it woke around him. People were already stirring, smoke from chimneys, the blacksmith firing up his forge, children's voices rising in play. Caleb headed for the general store. If he was going to South Pass City to find a lawyer, he needed to make sure Mara had what she needed while he was gone. Money for the boarding house, money for food, something to tide her over. It was the least he could do. It was nothing compared to what he owed, but it was a start. The general store smelled like coffee and leather and the faint sweetness of dried apples. Caleb pushed through the door just as Mrs. Brennan, the shopkeeper's wife, was arranging jars of preserves on a shelf. She glanced up, and her expression shifted, not quite hostile, but not welcoming either. Mr. Hart, she said, the formality deliberate. Ma'am. Caleb removed his hat. I need to settle an account for Mrs. Hart, for the boarding house and whatever supplies she might need. Mrs. Brennan's eyebrows climbed. Mrs. Hart. Yes, ma'am. So you're acknowledging it now? The marriage? Caleb's jaw tightened. I'm acknowledging I owe her better than what she's gotten so far. Mrs. Brennan studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. I suppose that's something. She pulled out a ledger. The boarding house is $2 a week. Food and sundries, figure another $1. Call it $3 weekly. Caleb counted out bills from his dwindling stake. I'll be gone a few days. Give her enough for 2 weeks. Where are you going? South Pass City, to find a lawyer. Mrs. Brennan's expression softened slightly. For the divorce. Word really did travel fast. Caleb didn't bother denying it. Yes, ma'am. She took the money, made a notation in her ledger. For what it's worth, Mr. Hart, running to fix a problem is better than just running. Late is better than never. Caleb wasn't sure he agreed, but he thanked her anyway. He left the store and headed for the livery, mentally calculating the ride to South Pass City. 2 days there, maybe a day to find the lawyer and handle business, 2 days back. 5 days total if nothing went wrong. 5 days during which Mara would be alone in a town that was already whispering about her. The thought made his stomach turn, but what choice did he have? This was what she wanted. An ending. Legal and final. He was saddling the roan when he heard boots on the planks behind him. You leaving again? Mara's voice was quiet, controlled. Caleb turned. She stood in the doorway, backlit by morning sun, her arms crossed. Going to South Pass City to see about the lawyer. When? Now. Of course. Right now. Because why wait? Why talk about it first? I am talking about it. I'm telling you where I'm going and why. No, Mara said, stepping into the livery. You're informing me. That's different. Caleb exhaled slowly. What do you want me to say? I want you to stop acting like I'm a problem you need to solve when I'm not looking. She moved closer, and he could see the exhaustion in her face, the shadows under her eyes. I want you to stop making decisions for me, about me, without me. This is what you asked for. I asked for an ending, not for you to ride off into the sunset the second I told you about James. The name, their son's name, landed like a stone in still water. Caleb flinched. That's not what I'm doing, isn't it? He didn't have an answer. Maybe she was right. Maybe he was running again, just calling it something else. Come with me, he said suddenly. Mara blinked. What? To South Pass City. Come with me. That way you can hear what the lawyer says yourself. Make your own decisions. She looked at him like he'd suggested they sprout wings and fly. On horseback? For 4 days? You got here on a stagecoach. This can't be worse. I don't have a horse. You can ride double with me, or I'll rent one. Mara shook her head slowly. Why would you want me to come? Because you're right, Caleb thought. Because I'm tired of making choices for other people. Because maybe if you're there, I can't run from whatever the lawyer tells us. Out loud, he said, because it's your life, too. Seems like you should be part of fixing it. Mara studied him for a long moment, searching his face for something, lies, sincerity. He didn't know. Finally, she said, Give me 10 minutes to get my things. She was back in 8. They rode out of Haven Creek with the sun climbing toward noon, Mara seated behind Caleb on the roan, her carpet bag secured with the bedroll. She kept her hands braced on the saddle rather than holding on to him, maintaining a careful inch of space between them. The first hour passed in silence. The land opened up around them, rolling grassland that gave way to rocky outcrops, stands of pine appearing as they gained elevation. The air smelled like sage and coming snow. You don't have to do this, Mara said finally. Do what? Punish yourself. Whatever you're thinking, that you owe me some grand gesture or you need to suffer for what happened. You don't. Caleb guided the horse around a washout. I'm not trying to suffer. I'm trying to do the right thing. The right thing 9 years ago was to stay, or to come back, or to at least send word you were alive. Her voice was matter-of-fact, drained of anger. The right thing now is just honesty. That's all I want. What do you want me to be honest about? Do you even remember that night, the wedding? Caleb was quiet for a long moment. Some of it, not all. What do you remember? He searched his memory, trying to separate truth from the haze. I remember you laughing. I remember thinking you were the prettiest thing I'd ever seen. I remember the justice of the peace had ink on his fingers. He paused. I remember promising to take you to see mountains. Behind him, Mara went very still. You remember that? Yeah. I thought you'd forgotten everything, that it was all just whiskey and stupidity. It was whiskey and stupidity, Caleb said, but I remember pieces, enough to know I meant what I said, even if I was too drunk to keep it. That's almost worse, Mara said quietly. If you'd forgotten completely, at least it would make sense. But you remembered, and you still left. I panicked. I woke up and I was 22 and married, and I had no idea how to be either of those things properly. So I did what I was good at. I ran. And joined the army. Seemed like a good way to either become a man or die trying. He gave a bitter laugh. Turned out it was neither. Just made me better at running. They rode on. The sun tracked west. Around mid-afternoon, they stopped to water the horse at a creek, and Mara walked downstream to refill her canteen. Caleb watched her crouch by the water, saw the way she moved, careful, economical, like someone used to making do with very little. What did you do? He asked when she returned. After, in Kansas. Worked, the dress shop where I'd been before. They took me back. I sewed until my fingers bled. She took a drink from the canteen. After James died, I couldn't stay in Abilene. Too many people who knew, who pitied me. So I went to Topeka, worked in a hotel laundry, saved every penny. For what? To find you. She said it simply, like it was obvious. I told myself I needed to know. If you were alive, if you'd started another life, if you even remembered me. It took 7 years to save enough to hire someone to look. Who did you hire? A man named Fletcher, former Pinkerton. He tracked you through Army records, then through the territories. Every time he got close, you'd moved on. She smiled without humor. You're good at disappearing. I'm sorry. Stop saying that. Sorry doesn't give me back my 20s, doesn't bring James back, doesn't undo 9 years of wondering. Then what do you want me to say? Mara looked at him directly. Nothing. I don't want words. I want you to sit with what you did. Really sit with it. Feel it. And then I want you to help me get free so I can finally live the life I should have had. The words were brutal in their honesty. Caleb nodded slowly. Okay. They mounted up again and rode until dusk painted the sky purple. They made camp in a stand of cottonwoods near a shallow stream. Caleb saw to the horse while Mara gathered wood for a fire. They worked in practiced silence. Two people used to taking care of themselves. Over a sparse meal of hardtack and dried beef, Mara said, "Tell me about the war." Caleb looked up, surprised. Why? Because you were there for 4 years. That's a long time. It must have changed you. He turned the question over. It did, just not the way I expected. How did you expect it to change you? I thought it would make me brave, honorable, the kind of man who could face his mistakes. He poked at the fire with a stick. Instead, it just taught me new ways to be afraid. Of what? Of staying still. Of letting people count on me. Of failing them when they did. He looked at her across the flames. I watched men die because I made the wrong call. Because I was too slow or too scared or too stupid. After a while, I figured the safest thing was to not let anyone count on me at all. Mara wrapped her arms around her knees. That's a lonely way to live. Yeah, but nobody gets hurt except me. That's not true though, is it? I got hurt. James got hurt, even if he never knew you. Everyone you leave behind gets hurt a little. Caleb didn't have an answer for that. They sat in silence as the fire burned down. Finally, Mara stood, unrolled her blanket on the far side of the camp, and lay down with her back to him. Caleb kept first watch, feeding the fire, listening to the night sounds. When he finally lay down, exhaustion pulled him under fast. He woke to Mara's scream. He was on his feet with his rifle before he was fully conscious, heart hammering. What? Where? Snake, Mara gasped. She was pressed against a tree, pointing at her blanket. Caleb moved carefully, saw the rattler coiled near where her head had been. It watched him with black eyes, tail vibrating a warning. He shot it. The gunshot echoed off the rocks. The snake's body thrashed once, then went still. Caleb kicked it away from the camp, then turned to Mara. She was shaking, arms wrapped around herself. It was right by my face. I felt it move. You're okay. It's dead. I could have, if I'd rolled over, but you didn't. He moved toward her slowly. You're okay. She nodded, but the shaking didn't stop. Without thinking, Caleb pulled her into his arms. She stiffened, then collapsed against him, her face pressed into his shoulder. He could feel her heart pounding, feel the tremors running through her. I'm sorry, she said into his shirt. I'm not usually, I don't fall apart like this. You almost got bit by a rattlesnake. Falling apart seems reasonable. She laughed, but it came out more like a sob. Caleb held her tighter. They stood like that for a long time, until her breathing steadied and the shaking subsided. When she finally pulled back, her eyes were wet. Thank you. Don't thank me for shooting a snake. Not for that. She gestured vaguely. For not making me feel stupid about being scared. You're not stupid, you're human. Something shifted in her expression. She looked at him differently, not with anger or grief, but with something more complicated, more dangerous. We should try to sleep, she said quietly. Long ride tomorrow. Yeah, but neither of them moved. The moment stretched, fragile and sharp. Caleb was acutely aware of how close she was, of the warmth of her even in the cold night, of the way her eyes held his. Caleb, she said softly. Yeah? I need you to understand something. What I said before about wanting an ending, I meant it. I can't keep living in this limbo. I can't keep being your wife in name only while you drift through life pretending I don't exist. I know. But I also need you to understand that I'm not made of stone. Standing here with you, having you hold me, it confuses things. Makes me remember why I said yes that night in Kansas. Caleb's throat tightened. Mara. I'm not asking for anything, she interrupted. I'm just asking you to be careful. With both of us. She stepped back, breaking the contact, and returned to her blanket. This time she moved it closer to the fire, farther from the trees. Caleb stood there for a long moment, then checked the perimeter, fed the fire, and took up watch again. He didn't sleep the rest of the night. They reached South Pass City late the following afternoon. The town was bigger than Haven Creek, built around the gold trade, with false front buildings and a main street churned to mud by constant traffic. Caleb found a modest hotel, paid for 2 rooms, separate, with a pointed look from the clerk, and left Mara to rest while he went to find the lawyer. Matthews had given him a name. Arthur Strand, with an office above the Land Claims Bureau. Caleb found it easily enough. A single room with a desk, filing cabinets, and a bookshelf sagging under legal volumes. Strand himself was younger than Caleb expected, maybe 35, with wire-rimmed spectacles and ink stains on his fingers. He listened to Caleb's explanation without interruption, occasionally making notes. Kansas marriage, he said when Caleb finished. Wyoming divorce. That complicates things. How complicated? Well, you'll need to establish residency. One of you has to have lived in Wyoming territory for at least 60 days. Have you? Caleb did the math. Not continuously. I've been in and out. What about your wife? She just arrived, less than a week ago. Strand tapped his pen against the desk. Then you'll need to wait. Get established somewhere, maintain a residence for at least 2 months. After that, we can file. 2 months, Caleb repeated. Minimum. The actual divorce could take another 3 to 6 months after filing, maybe longer if there are complications. What kind of complications? Contested dissolution, property disputes, children. Strand glanced at his notes. You mentioned there was a child. He died, years ago. I'm sorry to hear that, but it does simplify matters legally. He named a fee that made Caleb wince but wasn't impossible. Half now, half when the divorce is finalized. Caleb counted out bills. And we both have to stay in Wyoming the whole time? Technically just the petitioner, but it's cleaner if you're both here. Shows intent, stability, judges like that. 2 months. Minimum. Possibly 8 or 9 total. Caleb felt something twist in his chest. He thought this would be quick. A week. Maybe 2. Sign some papers, pay the fee, set Mara free. But 8 months of living in the same town, seeing her every day, watching her build a life that didn't include him. Mr. Hart? Strand was watching him. Is there a problem? No, no problem. We'll establish residency. In Haven Creek? Yeah. Strand made a note. I'll need you to come back in 60 days. Bring proof of residence. Letter from your landlord, receipt for rent, something official. Your wife should do the same. Caleb nodded numbly. 60 days. He left the office and walked back to the hotel in a daze. The street was crowded with miners and merchants, but he barely saw them. 8 months. Nearly a year. Living in Haven Creek, working alongside people who knew his shame, watching Mara piece together a life while they waited for legal permission to stop being married. He found her in the hotel's small dining room eating soup and bread. She looked up when he approached. What did he say? Caleb sat down heavily. We need to establish residency, 60 days minimum. Then we can file and the divorce takes another few months. How many months? 3 to 6, maybe more. Mara set down her spoon carefully. So we're talking about 8 or 9 months total. Yeah. She was quiet for a long moment, processing. And we both have to stay in Wyoming? Technically just one of us, But the lawyer said it's better if we're both there, shows we're serious. 8 months, Mara said softly. In Haven Creek. We could pick somewhere else. Somewhere bigger, where people don't know us. And start over again? Build a whole new life for 8 months just to walk away from it? She shook her head. No, Haven Creek is fine. At least there I can work, earn money. Mrs. Brennan said she might have sewing jobs for me. Caleb nodded. Okay, Haven Creek it is. They ate in silence. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the muddy street in shades of gold. Tomorrow they'd ride back. Tomorrow they'd start the waiting. Caleb, Mara said quietly. Yeah? I need you to promise me something. What? That you'll stay the whole time. Not just physically, but really stay. Don't drift. Don't check out. Don't start planning your next escape the second the papers are signed. I'm not going to Pete. Promise me. Her eyes were fierce. Because I can handle 8 more months if I know there's an ending, but I can't handle 8 months of you being half gone the whole time. Caleb met her gaze. I promise, I'll stay. She searched his face, then nodded slowly. Okay. They left South Pass City at first light. The ride back was quieter than the ride out, both of them wrapped in their own thoughts. They made camp in the same stand of cottonwoods, but this time Mara laid her bedroll closer to Caleb's without commenting on it. That night, as the fire burned low, she said, Tell me something true. About what? Anything. I'm tired of lawyers and logistics and plans. Tell me something real. Caleb thought about it. I kept your ring, he said finally. All these years, wrapped in oilcloth in my pocket, told myself 100 times to throw it away. Never could. Mara was quiet, then, I used to write you letters. What? When I was pregnant, when James was born, when he died, I'd write letters to you even though I had no address to send them to, just talking to you, telling you everything I wished you were there to see. What did you do with them? Burn them. Every Sunday after I visited James's grave, I'd burn that week's letter. It felt like sending them somewhere, even if nowhere was real. Caleb's chest ached. I'm sorry I wasn't there. I know, but sorry doesn't change it. They fell silent. Above them, stars wheeled through an infinite sky. Caleb? Yeah? Do you think, if things had been different, if you'd been older or sober or braver, do you think we could have made it work? The question hung in the cold air. Caleb turned it over, trying to find an honest answer. I don't know, he said finally. Maybe. Or maybe we would have just made each other miserable in a different way. I was so young, so stupid. I didn't know how to be a husband, didn't know how to be a father. Hell, I barely knew how to be a man. You think you know now? No, but at least now I know I don't know. That's something. Mara laughed softly. That's more honest than I expected. You asked for truth. I did. She shifted in her blankets. What are you going to do after? After the divorce? Yeah, where will you go? Caleb realized he hadn't thought about it. For years, the answer to that question had been automatic, somewhere else, wherever work was, wherever he could disappear. But now? I don't know, he admitted. Maybe I'll stay in Haven Creek. Really? I've been running for 9 years. Maybe it's time to stand still for a while, see what that's like. And if it's terrible, then at least I'll know. They arrived back in Haven Creek 3 days after they'd left. The town looked the same, half rebuilt, slightly shabby, perched on the edge of wilderness. But something felt different, or maybe Caleb felt different. He helped Mara down from the horse, and they stood there in the street while curious eyes watched from windows and doorways. Well, Mara said, here we are. Here we are. 8 months, give or take. She looked at him, and something complicated passed between them. Not quite forgiveness, not quite hope, but maybe the beginning of something that could become either. Try not to run off before breakfast tomorrow, she said. I'll do my best. She smiled, small, tired, but real, and walked toward the boarding house. Caleb watched her go, then led the horse to the livery. As he unsaddled the roan, he caught sight of his reflection in a water bucket. Same face, same scars, same haunted eyes. But maybe, just maybe, not quite the same man. He had 8 months to find out. The first week back in Haven Creek passed in a kind of uneasy truce. Caleb worked the rebuilding crews during the day, and Mara took in sewing for Mrs. Brennan and helped at the boarding house in exchange for reduced rent. They crossed paths in the street, at the general store, outside the church on Sunday morning. Each time they exchanged brief nods, careful words, nothing more. The town watched them like spectators at a prize fight, waiting for the next blow. It came on a Thursday afternoon. Caleb was helping Garrett reinforce the blacksmith shop's roof when he heard the laughter. Not the easy kind that came from genuine humor, but the sharp, cutting variety that drew blood. He looked down and saw 3 women clustered near the general store: Mrs. Brennan, the banker's wife, and a younger woman whose name he didn't know. Mara was walking past them, head down, arms full of fabric. "Must be nice," one of them said, voice carrying, "traveling all this way for a man who doesn't want you." Mara's steps faltered but didn't stop. "I heard she showed up with nothing but a carpet bag and a story," another added. "How do we even know she's telling the truth? Could be any woman claiming to be his wife." "She's got the paper to prove it," Mrs. Brennan said, but her tone was uncertain. "Papers can be forged, and even if it's true, what kind of woman chases a man across the country? Shows a lack of dignity, if you ask me." Caleb's hand stilled on the hammer. Garrett glanced at him, then at the women below. "You gonna let that stand?" Garrett asked quietly. Caleb climbed down the ladder without answering. He crossed the street in long strides, and the women's laughter died when they saw his face. "Ladies," he said, voice flat. The banker's wife had the grace to look embarrassed. The younger woman simply stared. Mrs. Brennan met his eyes directly. "Mr. Hart." "That woman you're talking about? She's my wife, legal and proper. And she didn't chase me. She came to settle a debt I owed her. So maybe before you tear her apart with gossip, you might consider showing some Christian charity instead." "We didn't mean—" the younger woman started. "Yeah, you did. You meant every word." Caleb looked at each of them in turn. "She's been here less than 2 weeks, and she's already working, paying her way, bothering no one. Which is more than I can say for some folks who've got nothing better to do than stand around inventing cruelty." He turned and walked away before they could respond, his heart pounding with something that felt uncomfortably like rage. He found Mara behind the boarding house, sitting on the back steps with her sewing in her lap. She wasn't working, just staring at the fabric like she couldn't remember what she was supposed to do with it. "You heard," she said without looking up. "Yeah." "You didn't have to defend me." "Yeah, I did." She finally looked at him, and her eyes were dry but hard. "It won't help. It'll just make them talk more. Now you're the tragic husband trying to protect the pathetic wife he doesn't love. I don't care what they say about me? Well, I care what they say about me." She set the sewing aside. "I've spent 9 years being pitied. The abandoned wife, the grieving mother, poor Mara Quinn with her dead baby and her missing husband. I came here thinking I could finally be something else. But it's the same story, just a different town." Caleb sat down beside her, leaving a respectful foot of space between them. "What do you want to be?" "I don't know, just not this. Not defined by what I lost." They sat in silence for a moment. Then Caleb said, "When I was in the army, there was this soldier, kid really, maybe 19. He got shot through the leg at Shiloh, survived it, but the wound got infected. Surgeon wanted to take the leg. Kid refused, said he'd rather die than be the cripple for the rest of his life. What happened? He died. 3 days later. Fever took him." Caleb picked up a wood chip from the steps, turned it over in his fingers. "I used to think he was stupid, throwing away his life over pride. But now I think maybe he just understood something I didn't. That sometimes who people think you are matters more than whether you're breathing." Mara looked at him with something like surprise. "That's darker than I expected." "Yeah, well, war teaches dark lessons." "So what's the lesson here? That I should care less what people think?" "No, that you get to decide who you are, not them. They can talk all they want, doesn't make it true. Easy to say when you're not the one they're talking about." "They talk about me too. I just stopped listening a long time ago." Mara studied him. "How?" "Practice and spite." He stood, offered her his hand. "Come on. You'll see." She took his hand and he pulled her to her feet. They walked through town together, side by side, making no effort to hide or hurry. People stared. A few whispered. Caleb ignored them all, and after a moment, Mara lifted her chin and did the same. He led her to the saloon. Caleb, I can't. Women don't. You can, and you will. He pushed through the door. The saloon was half full, mostly men nursing afternoon drinks. Conversation stopped when they entered. Dutch looked up from behind the bar, eyebrows climbing. 2 whiskeys, Caleb said. Caleb, Mara hissed. Trust me. Dutch poured 2 glasses, set them on the bar. Caleb paid, handed one to Mara. What are we doing? She whispered, giving them something real to talk about. He raised his voice slightly. This is my wife, Mara Hart. We were married 9 years ago in Kansas, and due to my own stupidity and cowardice, we've been separated ever since. We're filing for divorce once we establish residency, which means she'll be here for the next 8 months. During that time, I expect her to be treated with the same respect you'd show any resident of this town. Anyone who has a problem with that can take it up with me directly. The silence was absolute. Then Garrett, who'd followed them from the blacksmith shop, raised his glass. Fair enough. Welcome to Haven Creek, Mrs. Hart. One by one, the other men lifted their drinks. Not all of them. A few turned away, muttering. But enough. Enough that it mattered. Mara's hand trembled slightly as she raised her glass. She took a sip, coughed, and set it down. Thank you, she said quietly, and Caleb wasn't sure if she was talking to the room or to him. They left the saloon together. Outside, the sun was lowering, turning the street gold. That was either the bravest or the stupidest thing you've ever done, Mara said. Probably both. They're going to talk about this for weeks. Let them. At least now they know where we stand. Mara stopped walking, turned to face him. Where do we stand, Caleb? The question was heavier than it sounded. He chose his words carefully. We stand as 2 people trying to do right by a mistake we made when we were too young to know better. We stand as 2 people who owe each other honesty and respect for the next 8 months. After that, he trailed off. After that, we go our separate ways. Something flickered across her face. Relief? Disappointment? He couldn't tell. She nodded slowly. Okay. But as she walked back toward the boarding house, Caleb felt the weight of those words settle into his chest like stones. The days accumulated into weeks. October gave way to November, and the cold came down from the mountains like a warning. Caleb found work helping prepare the town for winter, cutting firewood, reinforcing roofs, checking chimneys. Mara's sewing business grew as women brought her torn coats and worn blankets to mend. They fell into a routine. Caleb would stop by the boarding house most mornings, ostensibly to check if Mara needed anything, but really just to see her face, to confirm she was still there. They'd exchange a few words about the weather or work, careful and polite, then part ways until the next day. It was during one of these morning visits that Mara said, I need to go to the livery. The mare I've been renting, Mrs. Patterson wants her back for winter hauling. I'll walk with you. They headed to the livery together. Inside, the smell of hay and horse sweat was almost comforting. Caleb was helping Mara settle the mare in her stall when they heard voices outside. Don't care what Hart says, whole thing's suspicious. Caleb recognized the voice. Roy Haskell, a ranch hand who'd been in town about as long as Caleb had. Woman shows up claiming to be his wife. He suddenly becomes her defender? Convenient. What are you suggesting? That was another man. Someone Caleb didn't know. I'm suggesting maybe she's working an angle. Get him to marry her proper. Wait for him to drink himself to death, inherit whatever he's got. Hart doesn't have anything worth inheriting. Maybe she doesn't know that. Mar had gone very still beside him. Caleb felt anger rise, hot and sharp. He stepped out of the stall. Say that again. Both men spun around. Haskell's face went red. I didn't. You were just spreading lies about my wife. 3rd time this week I've heard somebody question her character. I'm getting tired of it. Look, Hart, no offense meant. Then don't give any. Caleb took a step forward. You got questions about our situation. Ask me. You got opinions about her character. Keep them to yourself. Otherwise, we're going to have a problem. The other man raised his hands. We're leaving. Come on, Roy. They backed out quickly. Caleb stood there, breathing hard, fists clenched. Caleb. Mara's voice was quiet behind him. He turned. She was watching him with an expression he couldn't read. You can't fight everyone in town, she said. Watch me. This is what I was afraid of. You defending me just makes it worse. Makes people think we're hiding something. We're not hiding anything, aren't we? She moved closer. We're married, but living separately. Filing for divorce, but acting protective. You can't blame people for being confused. I can blame them for being cruel. Cruelty is just confusion with teeth. She touched his arm lightly. Let it go, please. I've survived worse than gossip. But Caleb couldn't let it go. Over the next week, he found himself paying closer attention to how people treated Mara. Most were merely cold. They didn't go out of their way to speak to her, but they didn't actively shun her either. A few, like Mrs. Brennan and Garrett, made efforts to be kind, but others, like Haskell and his friends, seemed to take pleasure in their quiet cruelties. Conversations that stopped when Mara approached. Deliberate exclusion from church social events. Prices at the general store that seemed to climb when she was the customer. It gnawed at him. Then came the day supplies needed hauling from the railroad depot 15 miles south. Caleb volunteered, grateful for the work and the distance. He was loading the wagon when Mara appeared. I'm coming with you, she said. I need fabric. Mrs. Brennan said there's a dry goods store in Ralston that carries better quality than what's here. It's a hard ride. We'll be gone all day. I can handle hard rides. I got here, didn't I? So they set out together in the pre-dawn cold, the wagon creaking beneath them. The road was rough, carved through hills that were just beginning to show their winter colors. They rode in comfortable silence for the first hour. Then Mara said, Can I ask you something? You can ask. Can't promise I'll answer. Fair enough. She was quiet for a moment. When you were in the war, did you ever think about me? The question surprised him. Sometimes. What did you think? That you were probably better off, that whatever life you'd built without me was probably happier than anything I could have given you. He glanced at her. I was wrong about that. You couldn't have known about James. No, but I should have known leaving would hurt you, should have cared enough to find out. Would it have changed anything if you'd known I was pregnant? Caleb turned the question over honestly. I want to say yes, but truthfully, I don't know. I was so young, so scared. I might have run anyway and just hated myself more for it. At least that's honest. They rode on. Around midday, they stopped to rest the horses. Mara unpacked bread and cheese from her bag, and they ate sitting on a flat rock overlooking a valley that stretched toward distant mountains. It's beautiful here, Mara said. I promised to take you to the mountains. Guess I'm 9 years late. She smiled slightly. Better late than never. They reached Ralston by mid-afternoon. It was barely bigger than Haven Creek, a handful of buildings clustered around the depot. While Caleb loaded supplies, Mara went to the dry goods store. She emerged half an hour later with a wrapped parcel and an expression Caleb couldn't quite read. Everything okay? He asked. Fine. Just the woman in the store. She was kind. Didn't know me, didn't have opinions about me. It was nice. We could stay, Caleb said suddenly. Mara looked at him. What? Here. Ralston. For the residency requirement. Nobody knows us here. You could start fresh. And you? I could, I don't know, work. Same as anywhere. Mara shook her head slowly. No. We already told the lawyer Haven Creek. Besides, running to a new place doesn't fix anything. Just gives you new scenery for the same problems. When'd you get so wise? 9 years of thinking gives you time to figure things out. They started back as the sun lowered. They were maybe 5 miles from Haven Creek when the weather turned. It came fast, the way mountain storms do. The sky darkening from blue to bruised purple, the temperature dropping until their breath showed white. Then the first snowflakes, fat and wet, falling faster and faster until the road ahead disappeared into a swirling white curtain. We need to find shelter, Caleb shouted over the rising wind. Where? There's nothing out here. But there was, barely. About a quarter mile off the road, half hidden by a stand of pines, stood an old line shack. Caleb had passed it a dozen times without thinking much of it. Now it looked like salvation. He urged the horses toward it, fighting the wind. By the time they reached the shack, snow had covered everything in a thick white blanket, and visibility was down to a few feet. Caleb kicked the door open. The inside was tiny, maybe 10 feet square, with a rusted stove, a broken chair, and a pile of old furs in the corner that smelled like mildew and mouse. But it had 4 walls and a roof, and right now that was enough. He helped Mara inside, then went back for the horses. He managed to get them into a lean-to beside the shack, threw blankets over them, then fought his way back inside. Mara was crouched by the stove, trying to coax life from the handful of kindling she'd found. Her hands were shaking from cold. "Here!" Caleb took over, got a fire started with practiced efficiency. Smoke billowed at first, then the chimney caught and drew it up. Weak heat began to radiate from the stove. They stood close to it, not speaking, letting the warmth slowly penetrate their frozen layers. Outside, the wind howled like something alive. "How long will this last?" Mara asked. "Could be an hour. Could be all night." Caleb checked their supplies. The food was in the wagon, but he'd managed to grab one of the blankets. "We should stay warm. Storm like this, cold's more dangerous than anything." "I know." But as the temperature continued to drop and the fire burned through the limited fuel, Caleb realized they had a problem. The stove was too small, the fuel too scarce, and the shack too drafty to hold heat properly. "We need to conserve warmth," he said quietly. Mara looked at him. Understanding dawned in her eyes. "You mean share body heat? I'm not trying to, I know." She wrapped her arms around herself. "It's just practical." "Yeah, practical." They arranged the furs from the corner, musty but dry, and the blanket from the wagon. Caleb sat down with his back against the wall. After a moment's hesitation, Mara settled beside him, close enough that their shoulders touched. "This okay?" he asked. "It's fine." But her voice was tight, and he could feel the tension in her body. Minutes passed. The fire crackled. The wind screamed. "Caleb," Mara said finally, "I need to tell you something. About that night in Kansas." His stomach tightened. "You don't have to—" "I wasn't drunk," she interrupted. "I told you that before, but I don't think you understood what I meant. I was completely sober. I knew what I was doing. I wanted to marry you." Caleb didn't know what to say. "I was so tired," Mara continued, her voice soft. "Tired of being alone. Tired of being afraid. You were kind to me that night, really kind, not just trying to get something. You listened when I talked. You made me laugh. And when you asked me to marry you, even though you were drunk and probably didn't mean it, I said yes because I wanted it to be real. Mara," his voice cracked, "and when I woke up the next morning and you were gone, I told myself it didn't matter, that I'd been stupid to hope. But then I realized I was pregnant, and suddenly it mattered more than anything." She turned to look at him, and in the firelight her eyes were bright with unshed tears. "I kept waiting for you to come back. Every day for months. I'd see a man on horseback and my heart would jump, but it was never you." "I'm sorry," Caleb said, and the words felt like shattered glass in his throat. "I'm so sorry. I know you are, but sorry doesn't change it. I know." He looked at her directly. "If I could go back, if I could be the man you needed me to be." "You can't. Nobody can." Mara's voice was steady now, but sad. "That's what I've learned. You can't go back. You can only go forward, and that's what I'm trying to do. Get the divorce, start over, build the life I should have had. Without me in it. Without anyone in it but me. For a while, anyway. I need to learn who I am when I'm not waiting for someone else to make me whole." The words should have been a relief. Instead, they felt like a door closing. They sat in silence as the storm raged. Eventually, despite the cold and the discomfort, exhaustion began to pull at Caleb. His eyes grew heavy. Beside him, Mara's breathing had deepened. He was halfway to sleep when she shivered violently. "Cold?" he murmured. "A little." Without thinking, Caleb put his arm around her shoulders, drawing her closer. She stiffened, then slowly relaxed against him, her head coming to rest on his chest. "This is dangerous," she whispered. "I know. We're supposed to be ending this, not—" But neither of them moved. Caleb could feel her heartbeat against his side, steady and sure. Could smell the soap she used, something faintly floral that reminded him of spring. Could feel the weight of her trust as she let herself lean on him. 9 years. 9 years of wondering what if. 9 years of carrying the weight of his choices. And now here she was, real and warm and alive in his arms, and all he could think was how badly he wanted to keep her there. "Mara," he said quietly. She tilted her head to look up at him. Their faces were inches apart. He could see the freckles scattered across her nose, the tiny scar on her chin, the way her lips parted slightly as she breathed. "We shouldn't," she whispered, but she didn't move away. "I know." The moment stretched, taut and trembling. Caleb felt his hand come up to cup her face, his thumb brushing her cheekbone. Mara's eyes closed briefly, and a small sound escaped her throat. Not quite a gasp, not quite a sigh. "Caleb, if we do this, if we let this happen." "I know," he said again. And he did know. He knew it would complicate everything. Knew it would make the divorce harder, the goodbye more painful. Knew it was probably the worst possible decision they could make. He kissed her anyway. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't soft or sweet or any of the things a kiss should be. It was desperate and hungry, 9 years of longing and regret and want compressed into a single moment. Mara made a sound against his mouth, surprise or surrender, he couldn't tell. And then she was kissing him back with equal desperation, her hands fisting in his shirt. They broke apart, gasping, foreheads pressed together, breathing each other's air. "This doesn't change anything," Mara said, but her voice shook. "I know. We're still getting divorced. I know. It's just, I know." She kissed him again, and this time there was something almost violent in it, like she was trying to hurt him, or hurt herself, or maybe both. Caleb pulled her closer, one hand tangled in her hair, the other pressed against the small of her back. When they broke apart again, Mara was crying. "I hate you," she whispered against his mouth. "I hate you so much." "I know." "You ruined everything. You ruined my life. I know. And I still—" her voice broke. "I still want you. How is that possible? How can I want someone who hurt me so much?" Caleb had no answer. He just held her while she cried, pressing kisses to her temple, her cheek, her hair. Outside, the storm continued its assault, but inside the tiny shack, wrapped in threadbare furs and shared warmth, they clung to each other like survivors of a shipwreck. Eventually, the tears stopped. Mara pulled back slightly, wiping her eyes. "I'm sorry," she said. "For what?" "For falling apart. For—" she gestured vaguely at the space between them. "For this. Don't apologize. Not for this." She looked at him with red-rimmed eyes. "What are we doing, Caleb?" "I don't know, but whatever it is, we don't have to figure it out tonight." Mara nodded slowly. She settled back against him, and this time when his arms came around her, it felt less like desperation and more like something quieter, something that might, in a different world, have been comfort. They stayed like that through the long night, dozing fitfully, waking when the fire burned too low, feeding it with scraps of wood from the broken chair. By dawn the storm had passed, leaving behind a world transformed by snow. They rode back to Haven Creek in silence, the wagon wheels carving fresh tracks through pristine white. When they arrived, people stared at their disheveled clothes, their exhausted faces, the way they sat close together on the wagon seat. Let them stare, Caleb thought. Let them talk. He helped Mara down in front of the boarding house. Their hands lingered together a moment longer than necessary. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for keeping me warm." "Any time." He meant it more than he should have. She gave him a look that was equal parts warning and want, then disappeared inside. Caleb drove the wagon to the livery, unloaded supplies with mechanical precision, and tried not to think about how her mouth had felt against his, how her body had fit perfectly in his arms, how right it had felt to hold her. He was failing miserably. That night, lying in the loft, he touched his lips and could still taste her, could still feel the ghost of her warmth, could still hear her voice saying, "I hate you," with tears streaming down her face. 8 months suddenly felt like both an eternity and nowhere near long enough. The morning after the storm, Caleb woke to find Haven Creek transformed into something from a different season entirely. Snow lay thick on every surface, muffling sound, turning the rough settlement into something almost beautiful. He stood in the livery doorway, breath clouding the air, and tried to convince himself that last night had been a mistake born of cold and fear and proximity. He failed at that too. For 3 days he avoided her. Not obviously. He still nodded when they passed in the street, still tipped his hat. But he made sure their paths didn't cross for longer than a few seconds. It was cowardice dressed up as courtesy, and he knew it. On the fourth day, she cornered him. He was splitting wood behind the boarding house when he heard her voice. "You're avoiding me." Caleb brought the axe down hard, splitting a log clean through. "I'm working." "You've been working in very specific places where I'm not. That's called avoiding." Mara moved closer, arms crossed against the cold. "We need to talk about what happened." Nothing happened. "Caleb, we got caught in a storm. We kept each other warm, that's all." He set another log on the stump, raised the axe. "That's not all, and you know it." The axe came down. Wood split. "What do you want me to say, Mara?" "I want you to look at me and tell me the truth." He finally turned to face her. Her cheeks were flushed from cold, her dark hair escaping from its braid. She looked tired and determined and heartbreakingly real. "The truth," he said carefully, "is that kissing you was a mistake. It confused things, made everything harder." "For who?" "For both of us." "Don't tell me what's hard for me." Her voice sharpened. "I'm the one who's been waiting 9 years for honesty from you. The least you can do is give it to me now." Caleb set down the axe. "Fine. You want honesty? I haven't stopped thinking about it, about you, about how you felt in my arms, about how badly I wanted to—" He stopped himself. "But it doesn't matter what I want. We're getting divorced. You said it yourself. You need to learn who you are without someone else. That includes me." "I know what I said." "Then what are we doing here?" Mara was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was softer. "I don't know. I needed to make sure we were clear that this doesn't change the plan." "It doesn't." "Good." But she didn't leave. She stood there, worrying her lower lip between her teeth, and Caleb recognized the gesture from 9 years ago. She did it when she was working up to saying something difficult. "What?" he asked. "People saw us come back together, from the storm. They're talking. People are always talking. It's worse now. They're saying—" She looked away. "They're saying I seduced you in that shack, that I'm trying to trap you into a real marriage." Anger flared hot in Caleb's chest. "Who's saying that?" "Does it matter? The point is, we need to be more careful. No more—" She gestured vaguely. "Whatever that was, we need to keep our distance. That's what I've been doing." "I know. I'm saying it out loud so we both understand." "I understand." He picked up the axe again. "Anything else?" Mara flinched at the coldness in his tone. "No, that's all." She walked away, and Caleb split wood until his shoulders screamed and his hands blistered, trying to drive out the image of her face. December arrived with bitter cold and shorter days. The work in Haven Creek slowed as winter settled in hard. Caleb took what jobs he could find, hauling firewood, clearing snow from roofs, repairing storm damage. Mara's sewing business remained steady. They were civil when they crossed paths. Polite. Careful. It was killing him. He was mucking out stalls one afternoon when Garrett appeared in the livery doorway. "Got a minute?" the blacksmith asked. "Sure." Caleb leaned the pitchfork against the wall. Garrett pulled out a flask, took a swig, offered it to Caleb. "You look like hell." "Thanks." Caleb drank, felt the whiskey burn. "You gonna tell me what's eating you, or do I have to guess?" "Nothing's eating me." "Right, and I'm the King of England." Garrett took the flask back. "Look, I'm not trying to pry, but you're wound tighter than a $2 watch, and it's starting to show. You nearly took Roy Haskell's head off yesterday for nothing." He was running his mouth. He's always running his mouth. Usually you ignore it. Garrett studied him. "This about your wife?" "She's not—" Caleb stopped. "It's complicated." "Complicated how? You're married or you're not." "We're getting divorced." "But you're not divorced yet." Caleb didn't answer. Garrett sighed. "You know what your problem is? You're so busy punishing yourself for what you did 9 years ago, you can't see what's right in front of you now." "And what's that?" "A woman who crossed 1,000 miles to find you, who could have just written you off, married someone else, moved on. But she didn't. She came looking. That means something." "It means she wanted closure. An ending." "You sure about that?" Garrett handed back the flask. Because from where I'm standing, if she just wanted closure, she would have taken it and left already. But she's still here, working, building a life. Seems to me like maybe she's not as sure about that ending as she claims. It doesn't matter what she wants. I can't give her what she needs. How do you know what she needs? Because she told me. She needs to be her own person, not defined by me or what I did to her. And you agree with that? Caleb took another drink. Yeah, I do. Then you're both idiots. Garrett clapped him on the shoulder. But what do I know? I'm just a blacksmith. He left Caleb standing there with the flask and a head full of questions he couldn't answer. That night, Caleb couldn't sleep. He lay in the loft listening to the wind howl and thinking about what Garrett had said. About Mara still being here. About her building a life in Haven Creek instead of just waiting out the residency requirement. Around midnight, he gave up on sleep and climbed down from the loft. He pulled on his coat and walked through the empty streets, snow crunching under his boots. He didn't plan where he was going, but his feet carried him to the boarding house anyway. A single light burned in an upstairs window. Mara's room. He stood there like a fool, staring up at that light, wondering what she was doing, sewing probably, or reading, or lying awake thinking about the same things that kept him awake. The light went out. Caleb turned to leave and nearly ran into her. She was wrapped in a shawl, her hair loose around her shoulders, holding a lantern. I saw you from the window, she said quietly. What are you doing here? I don't know. It's the middle of the night. I know. She studied his face in the lantern light. You look terrible. So I've been told. Can't sleep? Mara was quiet for a moment. Then she said, Me neither. They stood there in the snow, breath clouding between them. Finally, Mara said, There's coffee in the kitchen. Mrs. Patterson won't mind if we sit a while. The boarding house kitchen was warm and smelled like bread and dried herbs. Mara made coffee while Caleb sat at the scarred wooden table. She poured 2 cups, added sugar to hers, and sat across from him. What's keeping you awake? She asked. Too many things. Same. She wrapped her hands around her cup. I keep thinking about that night. In the shack. Caleb's chest tightened. Mara, let me finish. I've been trying to convince myself it was a mistake, that it didn't mean anything, but I can't stop thinking about it. About you. And I hate myself for it. She looked up at him. How do I stop wanting someone who's wrong for me? I don't know. If you figure it out, let me know. You feel it too? Yeah. The admission cost him. Every damn day. So what do we do? Exactly what we've been doing. Keep our distance. Wait out the residency. Get the divorce. Move on. And if I don't want to move on? The words hung in the air like smoke. Caleb felt his heart kick against his ribs. Don't say that. Why not? It's true. Because it's not fair to either of us. You said it yourself. You need to learn who you are without me. Maybe I already know who I am. Maybe I just needed to stop being angry long enough to admit it. Mara, Caleb stood abruptly, needing distance. We can't do this. Why not? Because I'll ruin it again. I'll let you down. He ran a hand through his hair. I'm not good at staying, at being what people need. You've stayed here for 2 months now. That's longer than you've stayed anywhere since the war. That's different. How? She stood too, moving closer. How is it different? Because leaving you again would... He stopped, the truth too raw to speak. Would what? Would break me, he said quietly. And I'm already half broken. I don't think I'd survive losing you twice. Mara's eyes filled with tears. Then don't lose me. It's not that simple. Why not? We're both adults. We know what we want. Why can't it be simple? Because you deserve better than me. Stop telling me what I deserve. Her voice rose. I've spent 9 years of my life waiting for you to decide what I deserve. I'm done waiting. I'm done letting you make my choices for me. So what do you want? I want you to stop running. I want you to stand still for once and fight for something. I'm here, aren't I? I stayed. Physically, yes. But you're still half gone. Still planning your exit. I can see it in your eyes every time you look at me. The truth of it landed like a blow. Caleb sank back into his chair. You're right, I am. Because staying, really staying, is the most terrifying thing I can think of. Mara sat down across from him again. More terrifying than war? Yeah, because in war, the worst that happens is you die. But this? If I stay and mess this up, I have to live with it. Watch you hate me, know I had a second chance and wasted it. You're already living with messing it up the first time. How is this different? Because the first time I was young and stupid. This time I'd have no excuse. They sat in silence. The coffee grew cold. Outside, snow began to fall again, soft and silent. Caleb, Mara said finally, I'm not asking you to be perfect. I'm just asking you to try. What if trying isn't enough? Then at least we'll know. At least we won't spend the rest of our lives wondering what if. Before Caleb could respond, footsteps sounded on the stairs. They both fell silent as Mrs. Patterson appeared in the doorway, wrapped in a robe, her gray hair in a braid. Thought I heard voices, she said, eyeing them. Everything all right? Yes, ma'am, Mara said quickly. I'm sorry we woke you. Mr. Hart was just leaving, Caleb finished. He stood, nodded to Mrs. Patterson. Sorry for the disturbance. He left before Mara could say anything else. Outside, the cold air hit him like a slap. He walked fast, trying to outpace the conversation, the temptation, the terrible hope that had started blooming in his chest. The next week passed in a blur. Caleb threw himself into work, taking every job offered, staying busy from dawn to dark. He saw Mara in church on Sunday, her voice clear and true during the hymns. Their eyes met once across the aisle, and the look she gave him was equal parts frustration and longing. On Thursday afternoon, a stagecoach arrived. Caleb was repairing a fence near the hotel when the door opened and a man stepped out. He was tall, well-dressed in city clothes, with dark hair touched with silver at the temples. He moved with the easy confidence of someone used to being important. He spoke to the driver, paid him, then turned to survey Haven Creek with an expression that suggested he found it wanting. Caleb felt unease prickle down his spine. The man walked into the hotel. Caleb told himself it was none of his business, went back to work. But the unease persisted. That evening, he was having dinner at the saloon when Dutch leaned across the bar. You see that fancy fellow who came in on the stage? Yeah, who is he? Vernon Hale, from Kansas City. Asked after your wife. Caleb's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. Asked what? Where she was staying. Said he was an old friend. Dutch's expression suggested he doubted that claim. I sent him to the boarding house. Caleb was out the door before Dutch finished speaking. He reached the boarding house to find Vernon Hale on the front porch, talking to Mara. She had her arms wrapped around herself, her expression carefully neutral. Just want to talk, Hale was saying. Surely you can spare a few minutes for an old friend. We're not friends, Vernon. That's harsh. We've known each other for years. Knowing someone isn't the same as being friends. Caleb climbed the steps. There a problem here? Hale turned, assessed Caleb with cool gray eyes. And you are? Caleb Hart, her husband. Something flickered across Hale's face. Surprise, maybe, or calculation. Ah, the famous missing husband. Mara's told me all about you. Has she? It wasn't a question. Vernon is a banker in Kansas City, Mara said quickly. We knew each other there. He's just passing through. Actually, Hale said smoothly, I came specifically to see you, Mara. When I heard you'd left Topeka, I was worried. And when I learned where you'd gone, he shook his head. Well, I had to come see for myself that you were all right. I'm fine. Are you? Living in a frontier town, taking in sewing, married to a man who abandoned you once already? Hale's voice was gentle, concerned, and Caleb instantly hated him for it. This isn't the life you deserve. You don't know what I deserve. I think I do. I've known you for 3 years, Mara. I know how hard you worked, how much you sacrificed, and I know... He paused. I know about the child. Mara went very still. Vernon, I'm only saying you've been through enough. You don't need to keep punishing yourself by staying here. I'm not punishing myself. Then come back to Kansas City. With me. I can offer you a real life, security, respect. Everything Hale gestured at Caleb, can't give you. The words landed like punches. Caleb felt something cold and hard settle in his stomach. That's enough, Mara said quietly. You need to leave. I have a room at the hotel. I'm staying through the weekend. Think about what I said. Hale touched his hat. It was good to see you, Mara, even under these circumstances. He walked away, boots echoing on the frozen street. Mara and Caleb stood in silence. Finally, Caleb said, "Who is he? Really?" "I told you, a banker. We met after James died. He was kind to me when I needed it. And now he's here, offering you a life. A life I don't want. You sure about that? Security, respect, those don't sound like terrible things." Mara turned on him, eyes blazing. "Don't you dare. Don't you dare take his side." "I'm not taking anyone's side. I'm just saying he's right. He can probably give you things I can't." "What if I don't want those things from him? What if you should?" "What's that supposed to mean?" Caleb felt like he was standing on the edge of a cliff. "It means maybe he's your chance at the life you deserve, the one you said you needed." "I said I needed to learn who I am, not that I needed a rich husband to take care of me. But maybe what? Maybe you want me to go with him so you can stop feeling guilty? So you can go back to drifting without me complicating things?" "That's not what I—" "Then what are you saying, Caleb? Because from where I'm standing, it sounds like you're trying to convince me to leave." He didn't have an answer. The terrible thing was, part of him did want her to go. Not because he wanted to be rid of her, but because watching her build a better life, even if it was with someone else, felt like the closest thing to redemption he could offer. "I should go," he said finally. "Of course you should. That's what you do." Mara's voice was bitter. "Run away the second things get complicated." "I'm not running. I'm giving you space to think." "I don't need space. I need—" She stopped, pressed her lips together. "Never mind. Go. Do whatever you want." She went inside, closing the door firmly behind her. Caleb stood on the porch for a long moment, then walked back to the livery. He climbed into the loft, lay down, and stared at the ceiling. Garrett was right. He was an idiot. Over the next 2 days, Vernon Hale made his presence known. Caleb saw him walking with Mara through town, saw him buying her coffee at the hotel, saw the way he made her laugh, easy and natural, like he hadn't ruined her life and then spent 9 years avoiding the consequences. Each sighting felt like broken glass in Caleb's chest. On Saturday evening, Caleb was shoeing a horse when Garrett appeared again. "You just gonna let him court your wife?" "We're getting divorced." "Not yet, you're not. And even if you were—" Garrett shook his head. "Man, what is wrong with you?" "Too many things to list." "You love her?" The question caught Caleb off guard. "What?" "Simple question. You love her?" Caleb set down the horse's hoof carefully. "I don't know. Maybe. Probably. Yeah." "Then why are you letting her walk away?" "Because she deserves better than me." "Did she say that?" "Then stop deciding for her." Garrett's voice hardened. "I watched my brother do this same stupid thing. Push away the woman he loved because he didn't think he was good enough. You know what happened? She married someone else, had a family. He spent the rest of his life alone, drinking himself to death, wishing he'd been braver, died last year, miserable and full of regrets. I'm trying to do the right thing. The right thing for who? For her or for you, so you don't have to risk actually being happy?" Caleb didn't answer. Garrett left him there with the horse and his thoughts. That night, Caleb walked to the church. It was empty, cold, dark. He sat in the front pew and stared at the wooden cross on the wall. He'd never been much for prayer. The war had beaten most of the faith out of him, but sitting there in the silence, he found himself speaking anyway. "I don't know what to do," he said quietly. "I want to do right by her, but I don't know what that looks like, and I'm scared. I'm so damn scared of messing this up worse than I already have." No answer came, just silence and cold. He left the church and started walking. His feet carried him toward the boarding house again, but this time he saw Vernon Hale on the porch, talking to Mara. She was shaking her head, gesturing, clearly upset. Caleb moved closer, staying in the shadows. "Can't keep living like this," Hale was saying, "waiting for a man who's already made his choice. He doesn't want you, Mara. If he did, he'd fight for you. But he's not fighting, he's letting you go." "You don't know what you're talking about." "Don't I? Where is he now? He's had 2 days to come to you to tell you he wants you to stay, but he hasn't. That tells you everything you need to know. Vernon, please, come with me. Tomorrow. We can leave on the morning stage. I'll take care of everything." give you the life you should have had. Mara was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, I need to think. Of course, but Mara, Hale took her hand. Don't wait too long. Sometimes the chance doesn't come around twice. He left. Mara stood on the porch, hugging herself against the cold. Caleb stepped from the shadows. Don't go. She spun around, startled. How long have you been there? Long enough. He climbed the steps. Don't go with him. Why not? Because the words stuck in his throat. Because I'm asking you not to. That's not good enough. I know. Then give me something real, Caleb. Give me a reason to stay. This was it, the cliff edge, the moment where he could jump or turn back. Caleb took a breath and jumped. I love you, he said. I don't know when it happened, maybe that night in Kansas, maybe in that shack during the storm, maybe it's been there all along buried under guilt and fear. But I love you. And I know I've got no right to ask you to stay. I know I've given you every reason to leave, but I'm asking anyway. Please, stay. Mara stared at him, tears streaming down her face. Do you mean that? Every word. Even knowing I might leave anyway? Even knowing Vernon could give me stability and security and all the things you can't? Even knowing that. Because those things don't matter if you don't love him. And I hope, you still feel something for me too. I do, she whispered. I hate that I do, but I do. Caleb closed the distance between them, cupped her face in his hands. Then stay. Let me spend the next however many months proving I can be the man you need. And if I fail, if I let you down, then go, with my blessing. But give me the chance to try. Caleb, her voice broke. I'm done running. I'm staying, right here, for you, only for you. She kissed him. It was softer than the kiss in the shack, less desperate, but no less intense. It tasted like tears and hope and second chances. When they broke apart, Mara said, I'm still scared. Me too. And I'm still angry at you for all the years we lost. You should be. But I'm willing to try, if you are. I am. I swear to you, I am. They stood there on the porch, holding each other while snow began to fall again, soft and quiet, covering the world in white. Tomorrow would bring complications. Vernon Hale, the town's judgment, the residency requirement and the divorce paperwork that might not be necessary anymore. But tonight, for the first time in 9 years, they were choosing each other. And that felt like enough. Morning came too soon and not soon enough. Caleb woke before dawn, the promise he'd made to Mara burning bright in his chest. He dressed quickly, splashed icy water on his face, and headed into town with a purpose that felt both terrifying and right. Vernon Hale was taking breakfast in the hotel dining room when Caleb found him. The banker looked up from his eggs and coffee, one eyebrow rising. Mr. Hart, to what do I owe the pleasure? Mara's not leaving with you. Hale set down his fork with deliberate care. Did she tell you that? She doesn't have to, I'm telling you. I see. Hale leaned back in his chair. And what makes you think you have any say in what Mara does? Because she's my wife, and because last night I asked her to stay and she said yes. Something flickered across Hale's face. Disappointment, anger, calculation. You asked her to stay. How noble. And what exactly are you offering her, Mr. Hart? A half-rebuilt town in the middle of nowhere? A husband who abandoned her once and will likely do it again? Poverty and hardship and gossip? I'm offering her the truth. All of me. No more running. Words are cheap. Then I'll prove it with actions. Hale studied him for a long moment. You really think you can make her happy? I think I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying. And when you fail, when the guilt and the ghosts and whatever else haunts you becomes too much and you disappear again, what then? That's not going to happen. You don't know that. Men like you, broken men, damaged men, you're not built for staying. You're built for leaving. Caleb felt the words land, felt the truth in them trying to take root. But for the first time in 9 years, he refused to let it. Maybe you're right, he said quietly. Maybe I am damaged. Maybe I am broken. But I'm done letting that define me. I'm done using it as an excuse to run. So you can take your offer and your concern and your certainty that I'll fail, and you can get on that stagecoach back to Kansas City, because Mara's staying here. With me. Hale's jaw tightened. Does she know you're here, threatening me on her behalf? I'm not threatening you. I'm just making things clear. Clear, Hale laughed bitterly. You know what's clear? That you're selfish. You're keeping her here in this miserable place because you want her, not because it's what's best for her. That's for her to decide, not you, not me, her. And she's decided? She's deciding, every day, and every day I'm going to give her reasons to stay. Hale stood abruptly, tossing money on the table. You're making a mistake, both of you, but I can see I'm wasting my time here. He grabbed his coat. I'll be on the noon stage. If Mara changes her mind, she won't. We'll see. Hale brushed past him and left. Caleb stood there, heart pounding, hands shaking slightly from adrenaline. He'd never been good with confrontation, had spent most of his life avoiding it. But this felt different. This felt like standing up instead of running away. He left the hotel and walked to the boarding house. Mara was on the front porch, wrapped in her shawl, holding a steaming cup. I saw you go into the hotel, she said. Did you talk to Vernon? Yeah. And? I told him you weren't leaving with him. Mara's lips twitched. You told him, not asked if I'd decided, but told him. Caleb winced. I shouldn't have. I didn't mean to. Caleb. She set down her cup, moved closer. I'm teasing. It's fine. Actually, it's better than fine. It's... She touched his chest, right over his heart. It's you fighting for me. Like I asked. I meant what I said last night. All of it. I know, but morning light has a way of making promises seem less certain. I needed to see if you'd still feel the same way when the sun came up. I do. More, if anything. She smiled, and it was like watching the sun break through clouds. Good. Because I told Vernon the same thing this morning, that I was staying. How'd he take it? About as well as a man who's used to getting what he wants. He said I was making a mistake. She looked up at Caleb. Am I? I don't know, I hope not. But I promise you this, I will do everything in my power to make sure you never regret choosing me. That's a big promise. I know. They stood close together, breath clouding between them in the cold air. From down the street came the sound of the stagecoach being prepared, horses stamping and harnesses jingling. I should probably say goodbye, Mara said. Vernon was kind to me when I needed it. I owe him that much. You want me to come with you? No. This is something I need to do alone. Caleb watched her walk toward the hotel, forcing himself to trust her, to not let the old fears rise up. She disappeared inside and he waited. 10 minutes later, she emerged with Vernon Hale. They spoke briefly on the hotel porch, too far away for Caleb to hear. Then Hale touched his hat, climbed into the stagecoach, and was gone. Mara walked back to Caleb slowly. He said I'd regret this. Do you think you will? Ask me in 10 years. I will, every year, just to make sure. She laughed, and the sound was like music. But the town had other plans for them. That afternoon, Caleb was working at the livery when 3 men appeared in the doorway. Roy Haskell and 2 ranch hands Caleb recognized but didn't know well. Hart, Haskell said, we need to talk. Caleb set down the bridle he was mending. About what? About your wife. And the situation you've put this town in. What situation? The situation where we've got a woman of questionable morals living among decent folk. Where we've got a man who can't decide if he's married or divorced. Where we've got gossip and scandal and... Careful, Caleb interrupted quietly. Very careful how you finish that sentence. Or what? You'll fight all of us? Haskell stepped forward. We're tired of it, Hart. Tired of the drama. Tired of watching you and your wife play out your messy excuse for a marriage in front of the whole town. Either sort yourselves out or leave. We are sorting it out. By what? Kissing on porches? Letting fancy bankers court her while you stand around doing nothing? Haskell's voice rose. You're making Haven Creek look like a joke. Like a place with no standards, no morals. Caleb moved fast, grabbing Haskell by the collar and slamming him against the wall. I told you to be careful. You want to insult me? Fine. But you keep Mara's name out of your mouth or we're going to have a real problem. One of the other men grabbed Caleb's arm. Let him go. Not until he understands. Understands what? Haskell's face was red. That you've got some kind of claim on her? You left her for 9 years, Hart. You don't get to act righteous now. You're right, I don't. But I'm done letting people tear her apart with gossip and lies. She's a good woman who's been through hell, and she deserves better than your judgment. Caleb released him, stepped back. The 3 men stood there, tense and angry. This isn't over, Haskell said. Yeah, it is. Because I'm not leaving. Mara's not leaving. And you can either accept that or stay angry. Either way, we'll be here. They left, but Caleb knew it wasn't finished. Small towns had long memories and sharp tongues. That evening, walking back to the boarding house, he saw what he'd feared. A group of women, including the banker's wife and 2 others he didn't know, were clustered near the general store, their voices carrying in the cold air. Shameful, really, setting herself up in town, taking work from decent women. I heard she was with him in that shack for a whole night, unchaperoned. And now she's sending away that nice banker to stay with a man who doesn't even want her properly. Mara was across the street, her arms full of fabric, clearly hearing every word. Her face was carefully blank, but Caleb could see the hurt in the way she held herself. He'd had enough. He crossed the street, took the fabric from Mara's arms, and handed it to the nearest woman, the banker's wife. Hold this, he said. Then he turned to Mara, cupped her face in his hands, and kissed her. Not chastely, not politely, but thoroughly, deeply, leaving no question about his intentions or his feelings. When he pulled back, Mara was breathless and wide-eyed. The women behind them were silent with shock. Caleb turned to face them. Yes, she's my wife. Yes, we were separated. Yes, we spent a night together in a line shack during a storm. And yes, I love her, and I'm keeping her. Any other questions? The banker's wife's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. Good. Caleb took the fabric back, offered Mara his arm. Shall we? They walked away together, and behind them the silence erupted into furious whispers. That was, Mara started, stupid? Reckless? I was going to say wonderful. She squeezed his arm, but probably also stupid and reckless. I'm tired of watching them hurt you. They can't hurt me, not really. Words are just words. Words have power, and I'm done letting them use that power against you. They reached the boarding house. Mara turned to face him. Caleb, you can't fight the whole town. Watch me. I'm serious. This kind of thing, grand gestures, public displays, it might make you feel better, but it won't change their minds. If anything, it'll make things worse. But then what do you want me to do? Just let them talk? I want you to live your life with me in a way that makes their talk meaningless. Not by fighting or defending, but by just being happy, being together, showing them that what they think doesn't matter because we have something real. Caleb studied her face. When did you get so wise? 9 years of thinking gives you perspective. She smiled slightly. Come on, Mrs. Patterson's making stew. You should stay for dinner. Is that allowed? Me having dinner with you? It's my boarding house room that I pay for with my own money. I can have dinner with whoever I want. So he stayed. They ate stew and bread in the small dining room while Mrs. Patterson pretended not to watch them with approval. They talked about small things, the weather turning colder, the work that needed doing before winter settled in hard, the letter Mara was writing to her old landlord in Topeka. It was normal, domestic, terrifyingly perfect. 2 weeks passed. December deepened into January. The town's gossip began to lose its edge, not because people approved, but because Caleb and Mara gave them nothing new to feed on. They were simply together, walking to church, sharing meals, working side by side when they could. Caleb started building. He found a plot of land on the edge of town, not much, just a 1/4 acre with a stand of cottonwoods and a view of the mountains. He bought it with most of his savings and started framing a cabin. Garrett helped. So did a few other men who'd warmed to Caleb over the months. They worked through the short winter days, raising walls, setting a roof, building something solid and permanent. Mara found him there one afternoon, standing in what would be the main room, covered in sawdust. What is this? She asked. A house. I can see that. For who? For us. If you want it. He set down his hammer. I know we're still working toward the divorce, but I hoped, maybe we could stop working toward that and start working toward something else instead. Caleb, her voice was soft with wonder. I want to give you a home, Mara, a real one. Not a boarding house room or a livery loft, but a place that's ours, where we can build a life, where maybe someday, if you want, he couldn't finish the sentence. Where maybe we could have a family, Mara finished quietly. Yeah, or just us. Whatever you want. I just want to build something with you instead of always tearing things down. She walked through the unfinished space, running her hand along the rough timber. It's beautiful. It's not done yet. Needs windows, a proper floor, a kitchen. It's still beautiful. She turned to him. When did you start this? 3 weeks ago. I wanted to surprise you. Consider me surprised. She moved closer. And yes. Yes, what? Yes, I want this. Yes, I want to build a life with you. Yes to all of it. Caleb pulled her into his arms, and for a long moment they just stood there in the half-built house, holding each other. We should probably tell the lawyer we're not getting divorced, Mara said into his chest. Probably. And figure out if we need to get married again. Legally, since we never actually got divorced. We can ask Reverend Matthews. He's going to have opinions about all this. Let him. I've got opinions of my own now. February brought the kind of cold that made bones ache and breath freeze. But inside the cabin, nearly finished now, with windows and a floor and a kitchen that Mara had helped design, there was warmth. They were working together one evening, Caleb hanging a door while Mara swept sawdust, when they heard horses outside. Caleb opened the door to find Reverend Matthews and 3 men from town, Garrett, the general store owner, and surprisingly, Roy Haskell. Reverend, Caleb said carefully. Gentlemen, what can I do for you? Matthews cleared his throat. We need to talk. About your situation. Caleb tensed. What about it? Well, the thing is, Matthews glanced at the other men. The town's been divided about you and Mrs. Hart. Some folks think you should leave. Others think you should stay. We took a vote. A vote, Caleb repeated flatly, at the town meeting last night, about whether Haven Creek wants you here or not. Mara appeared beside Caleb, her hand finding his. And? Matthews smiled slightly. You can stay. 14 votes for, 6 against. It's settled. I don't understand, Mara said. Why vote at all? Garrett stepped forward. Because Haskell here, he nodded at Roy, insisted on it, said we needed to decide if we were a town that tolerated scandal or upheld morals. Haskell looked uncomfortable. I may have been hasty about some things, judgmental about others. My wife pointed out that I'm not exactly perfect myself. He looked at Caleb. I'm not saying I approve of everything that happened, but you've worked hard here. Built this place. He gestured at the cabin. With your own hands. That counts for something. So we're welcome? Caleb asked carefully. You're welcome, Matthews confirmed. On one condition. What condition? That you two get properly married here, in front of the town. Make it official and public and leave no doubt that you're committed to each other and to this community. Caleb looked at Mara. She looked back at him, a question in her eyes. We're already married, Caleb said slowly. Legal and binding. I know, Matthews said, but that was 9 years ago, in Kansas, with nobody from here as witness. What the town is asking, what I'm asking, is that you recommit to each other, here, now, as the people you are today, not who you were back then. A renewal of vows, Mara said softly. Exactly. It would put an end to the gossip. Show everyone that this is real and lasting. Caleb squeezed Mara's hand. What do you think? I think, she paused, I think it would be a new beginning, a chance to do it right this time. Then, yes, Caleb said to Matthews, we'll do it. The Reverend smiled. Good. How about Sunday, after regular service? Sunday's fine. The men left, and Caleb and Mara stood in their unfinished house, processing what had just happened. We're getting married, Mara said, wonder in her voice. Again. Seems like it. Are you nervous? Terrified. Me too. She laughed. Isn't that strange? We're already married, already committed, and I'm still terrified. It's different this time. This time we know what we're promising. And what are we promising? Caleb turned to face her fully. Everything. All of it. The good and the bad and the terrifying. No more running. No more halfway. Just us, building this life together, one day at a time. That's a big promise. I know. But I'm ready to make it. Are you? Yes. She kissed him softly. Yes, I am. Sunday came cold and clear. The church was full. Not because everyone approved, but because everyone was curious. Caleb stood at the front in his best shirt, freshly shaved, his hands trembling slightly. Garrett stood beside him. You ready for this? No, but I'm doing it anyway. The door opened and Mara walked in. She wore a simple dress, dark blue, borrowed from Mrs. Patterson, with her hair loose around her shoulders. She carried no flowers, no veil, nothing but herself. And she was the most beautiful thing Caleb had ever seen. She walked the aisle slowly, her eyes never leaving his face. When she reached him, she took his hands, and he felt the trembling in hers match his own. Reverend Matthews opened his Bible. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to witness Caleb James Hart and Mara Quinn Hart renew their vows before this community and before their Creator. Marriage is a sacred covenant. Caleb barely heard the words. He was too focused on Mara's face, on the tears gathering in her eyes, on the way she held his hands like she'd never let go. Forsaking all others, as long as you both shall live. Caleb, do you take Mara to be your lawfully wedded wife? I do. His voice was steady. I really, really do. Laughter rippled through the church. Mara, do you take Caleb to be your lawfully wedded husband? She smiled through tears. I do. Then, by the power vested in me, I now pronounce you... Matthews paused, smiled. Well, I pronounce you still married. You may kiss your wife. Caleb pulled Mara into his arms and kissed her while the church erupted in applause. When they broke apart, both of them were crying and laughing at the same time. They walked back down the aisle together, and this time when they stepped into the cold January air, it felt like walking into their future instead of running from their past. The celebration at the saloon went late into the evening. People who'd been cold to them offered congratulations. The banker's wife, grudgingly, said the ceremony was lovely. Even Haskell shook Caleb's hand and wished them well. As the night wore on and the crowd thinned, Caleb and Mara slipped away. They walked through the snow to their cabin, finished now, truly theirs, and stood in the doorway looking at the home they'd built together. I have something for you, Mara said. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded letter, yellowed with age. What is this? One of the letters I wrote you, after James died. I kept one. Just one. She handed it to him. You don't have to read it now, but I wanted you to have it. Caleb unfolded it carefully. The handwriting was shaky, the words blurred in places by what might have been tears. Dear Caleb, it began, our son died today. He was 6 weeks old. I named him James, after you, and he had your eyes. I'm writing this because I need to tell someone, and you're the only one who would understand, who should understand, even though you're not here. I'm so angry at you, and I miss you, and I wish you'd never left, and I hope wherever you are, you're alive and safe. I hate you and I love you, and I don't know how to live with both. Yours, Mara. Caleb's hands shook. Mara, that's who I was then, she said quietly. Broken and angry and lost. But I'm not her anymore. And you're not the man who left. We're different people now, better people, I hope. We are. He folded the letter carefully, tucked it into his pocket next to the ring he'd carried for 9 years. I'm going to keep this, as a reminder of what we survived to get here. Good. She took his hand. Come on, let's go inside. It's cold. They stepped into their home together. Caleb built a fire while Mara made coffee. They sat close on the simple furniture they'd assembled, watching the flames dance. Do you ever think about him? Mara asked softly. James? All the time, especially now. Because I'm trying to imagine what kind of father I would have been. What kind I still could be if... She paused. If we decided to try again someday. Caleb's heart kicked against his ribs. Is that something you want? Maybe. Not now. Not yet, but someday. If it happens. She looked at him. Would you want that? Yeah, he said quietly. I would. A chance to do it right this time. To be there. To not run. You won't run, Mara said with certainty. I know you won't. How do you know? Because you've had 100 chances to run in the past 3 months, and you're still here. Because you built us a house, because you stood in front of the whole town and promised to stay. She kissed him softly. Because you're not that scared boy from Kansas anymore. You're a man who keeps his promises. Caleb hoped she was right, prayed she was right. Spring came slowly to Wyoming that year, but when it came, it transformed everything. The snow melted, revealing green beneath. The cabin's garden, Mara's project, began to show the first tender shoots of vegetables. The town continued its own rebuilding, and Caleb was part of it now, not just passing through. One warm April evening, Caleb was sitting on their porch, watching the sun set over the Wind River Range, when Mara came out with 2 cups of coffee. Thinking about something, she asked. Just about how different things are now, from a year ago. A year ago you were drifting. I was still in Kansas. Neither of us knew this was coming. Best surprise of my life. Even with all the hard parts? Especially with the hard parts. They made the good parts mean something. Mara settled beside him. I got a letter today, from Fletcher, the investigator I hired to find you. Yeah? What'd he say? He wanted to know if I'd found you, if everything worked out. She smiled. I wrote him back, told him yes, I found you. And yes, everything worked out. Better than I ever imagined, actually. You think it's true? That everything worked out? Don't you? Caleb looked at their cabin, at the mountains beyond, at the woman beside him who'd crossed 1,000 miles to demand an answer and ended up giving him a reason to finally stand still. Yeah, he said. I do. They sat together as the light faded, not speaking, not needing to. The wind carried the scent of sage and new grass. Somewhere in town, a church bell rang. Their life, messy and imperfect and hard-won, spread out around them like a promise finally kept. Caleb had spent 9 years running from the mistake he thought he'd made. Turned out it wasn't a mistake at all. It was the beginning of everything that mattered, and he was done running. He was home.